Alabama. Roll On North America Tour presented by Kenworth. Saturday, October 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. Special guest Exile. Alabama live. All your favorite songs from the greatest country band of all time. On sale now at HighVTix.com. Produced by Outback Presents.
Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, Iowans everywhere. Welcome to Legends and Listeners. I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. The guy on the other half of your split screen is Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. We are joining you, as always, from the venerable, hallowed Channel Seed Studios and exclusively on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Scott, no shortage of topics to discuss today. I don't know how we're going to fit this into an hour.
There is a lot going on, no question. I mean, a couple of important games, some side issues, and and then some existential issues regarding the Big Ten and beyond.
So you've got a midweek trip to Nashville. So full disclosure, we're recording this on Tuesday night, airing Thursday morning. Because of your trip to Nashville, that means a lot to our Big Ten audience. I assume we'll get to that at some point. The Iowa football program, you may have heard, lost two key offensive players from its 2023 team, namely Caleb Brown. He and Leishon Williams end their Hawkeye careers to enter the portal midseason, a new phenomenon in college football. We've got plenty of thoughts on the quarterback situation. I don't know if we're going to talk about the fourth down decision at midfield. I know it's old news by now, but still something I'm still fired up about. We might get to the term union cards tonight. We've also got an amazing slate of Big Ten action this weekend, including the big noon game on Fox, Iowa versus Washington. And then Iowa men's basketball and women's basketball media day this week too. I don't think we'll get to that stuff, Scott. But anyway, that's a little recap of what we might get to in this show. But we discussed on Tuesday, what should we start with? And I think we settled on discussing the Ohio State game fallout, the reaction to Iowa's 35-7 loss. Let me throw it to you, Scott, on that. I predicted Iowa to be 9-3 this year. I predicted them to lose to Iowa State and Ohio State before the season. That is exactly where we are. So why is everybody done with Ferentz, done with the Hawkeyes?
I think that there's just a raw nerve that's exposed to this program by the fan base, and it just can't get over it. And every time there's a loss, there's an overreaction that I thought this time, frankly, was embarrassing. And we're subject to all kinds of, vile notes on Twitter and what have you during games and after games and stuff after they lose and don't play well and everything. But I thought this one was really, again, embarrassing, because I looked at Iowa as they were a 20-point underdog, and then it kind of fluctuated up and down from there. At Ohio State, which I think is the best team in the country, I picked them to win the national title. They have athletes galore everywhere. And for Iowa to lose by 4 touchdowns, I'm not saying people should be happy about that, but I think they should be realistic too, Chad. And I didn't see a whole lot of realistic people, at least the ones that were coming after us and yelling at us for the media. We need to start asking tough questions, which immediately gets me kind of in a defensive position, because we asked questions. And furthermore, I mean, this team's season is far from over. I mean, yes, they lost their second game. Playoff hopes are hanging by a string, no question. But there's still a lot more season to be played. They're probably going to be favored in every game, at least the way the trajectory shapes now. And so I was really kind of embarrassed about the overall overreaction from a lot of Iowa fans.
So when you say embarrassed, I know you kind of explained yourself there, but when you say embarrassed, do you mean just think people would have more perspective than that? Is that kind of like the thought process there?
Absolutely. And it's just there are times when you can get fired up and want to fire everybody and move on and stuff. And, Iowa State might have been one that you could kind of point to, maybe the Minnesota game last year. Certain situations, it's understandable, but this was not their worst performance they've ever had. They went up against a superior opponent. They made mistakes. It wasn't that they didn't move the ball. It was because they made mistakes that cost them. And again, they were playing a team that was that much better than them. And it's not that they are bad. It's that team is good. So I think the lack of perspective was a little jarring to me. And I think overall that, let's take a step back, on some of this. We will tonight criticize significantly certain areas of this program and what they did wrong, what they should do differently. But I think overall, the just get the pitchforks out and torches was just over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I also picked Ohio State to win the national title this year, and they were actually better than I even thought. I mean, Will Howard, I had questions about. He was fantastic. I mean, 21 for 25 passing, and also could run the ball for first downs, for touchdowns. He accounts for 5 touchdowns. You look at all 4 touchdown passes, Scott. They were all contested. Every single one of them was contested. It's not like it was just like there's a guy running 60 yards for a touchdown, and Iowa, isn't in position. They were tough throws. I'm not going to, they were the better team. They were clearly the better team. And Iowa committed 3 turnovers, all by its quarterback in a span of 10 snaps in the second half. I said this on our Hawk Central show on Tuesday, but it was like what Iowa did to Minnesota in the third quarter, Ohio State did to Iowa in the third quarter. And that's exactly what happened. Iowa football went on a 24-0 run, right? That was the second half score. In Minnesota, was it? And it was 28-7 in the second half of this game. I mean, it happens. So I'm with you on the perspective, but there's definitely plenty to criticize, Scott.
Oh, for sure.
No question. And go ahead.
Yeah. And then that is fair game. I think there are definite aspects to critique, to complain about, and to look under rocks to see if we find solutions. To me, it was just the totality of, when is Ferentz getting fired, blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on. We're talking about Ohio State. If they would go on the road and lose to Michigan State like that, okay. I'll provide the lighters, but when we're talking about Ohio State,
you heard it, folks. Oh man. Oh,
yeah.
Boy.
I'll dig up some of the Bics that I used to use back in the 90s when I smoked.
That's not is that Steeple Ridge in your glass there, Scott? We are recording at night.
You betcha.
Like, okay.
I'm not drinking it like this, though.
Yeah, right. So I've got some more positional stuff a little bit earmarked later in the show, but we did want to talk about quarterbacks. Obviously, you wrote about quarterbacks after the game. I wrote about quarterbacks after the game. One of the most, I think, important pieces of my week is the DVR Monday column I do, and I started doing it because I rewatch the games anyway, and so why not share those observations with you guys out there? And there's always something that you want to revisit that you covered in the press box that you just don't have time to dig into in especially in the news, both of our industries. I mean, we're both writing as fast as we can, but we have deadlines that we need to make in the print industry for sure. And you're doing the best you can with what information you have. And a lot of times in my articles, I try to point out like this deserves more digging, but initially, it didn't seem like Cade McNamara played his best game, blah, 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 blah. So when I rewatched the game in every aspect, I really took a specific focus on quarterback play because I knew that was what everybody was focused on. And rightfully so. I thought Cade McNamara played a good first half. He did what he needed to do. The throw to Weechin early in the game,
Mm-hmm.
we both agreed. We were both sitting next to each other in the press box. You got to make those plays if you're going to beat Ohio State. You have to make that throw. That's a throw that emphasized to me, Scott, that this passing offense has a very low ceiling. It has a low ceiling. But in the first half of that game, if you understand there's going to be a low ceiling because your quarterback just has not hit the deep ball, what he did with the on-time throws I thought was pretty good. But the second half is inexcusable, Scott. You can't commit 3 turnovers like that. The interception is 100% on him.
Yeah.
100%. He should have thrown to the other side of the field to Jacob Gill. That was the correct read. The wrong read was to throw to Vanderzee, and that's on him. Doesn't matter if Vanderzee got manhandled. That's on him. The 2 fumbles, where do you land on those things? I don't know if you've rewatched them a lot. You got to protect the football 100%. Mm-hmm. So you're the guy with the ball. Protect the ball. I thought the second one, Scott, the second fumble I thought was more on him, in my opinion, because I thought he was too jittery in the pocket, and understandable. He's made 2 turnovers already. It looked like he wanted to make a play so badly that he just should have tucked it in there with the contact coming. The first one, it looked like Sawyer was really well hidden. He probably didn't legitimately see him. Maybe give him a little bit of a pass on that. So I would say 2 of the 3 for sure were his fault.
Yeah, I start with the interception, and it's inexcusable, particularly in that part of the field. I mean, it is anywhere. I mean, let's face it. You throw it in the end zone, that's bad. If you throw it in the middle of the field, it's bad. If in your own end, it's bad. But given that was a pretty decent drive at that point, and it was an answer, and it was something that, okay, they're probably not going to win, and there are no moral victories, but you can build confidence even in defeat if you play well at certain times. And this was a moment to where they were really taking ownership of their offense, and they were moving the ball effectively. And then to see them, to see that conclusion, I thought was just really tough for the offense. And I thought it was tough for Cade and the bad read. And he tends to do this. I mean, his touchdowns and to interception ratio is damn near 1-to-1. And that's inexcusable for somebody in their 6th year of eligibility. And then I look at the forced fumbles; those happen. I'll say this: that one of them you live with, because you know what, Ohio State has a really good defense, and Ohio State has really good defensive linemen. You can't just neglect to give them their respect, because they deserve it and they earned it. But, I'm with you on the second one. I thought the second one was one that he should have just tucked the ball. And I think that's something that, maybe Spencer Petras deserved a little more credit for, because as often as he got hit, and the line was much worse then than it is now, and true. Yet he was still able to hold on to the ball. And then, of course, last year it was like Butterfingers with the ball back there with Deacon Hill. So, that's right. Where they are right now.
Well, and so the idea of a quarterback change, obviously, it's not happening. But I think that's where I came out of this game thinking, okay, Brendan Sullivan did come in and led the team to a touchdown drive. Somebody on Twitter asked this. I asked this as well, somewhere. I can't remember where I put this, but I think it was in DVR Monday. Would Cade McNamara have led the one touchdown drive Iowa got? Would Iowa have scored with Cade McNamara in the game? And I believe the answer is probably no, because Brendan Sullivan ran the ball 30 yards to start that drive. So if that's your answer, then you've got a question at quarterback to me. And if your quarterback is going to turn the ball over 3 times and a half, that's where I didn't understand it last year with Deacon Hill. Like, even if you don't believe in Joe Labus, Deacon Hill is a turnover machine, including in his own territory. So a head coach that values turnovers and possession so much, I don't understand why. That's where it doesn't equate to me, because his language is always protect the ball, protect the ball. Number one is protect the ball. And then if you don't protect the ball, you still get to stay in. Mm-hmm. So that's where I don't get it. necessarily with Ferentz. I don't mind him necessarily sticking with McNamara because he believes in him, but I think the hook should be really quick here if there's more turnover problems because if you look at Brendan Sullivan's history, he hasn't turned it over much. So I don't know. Why do you think Ferentz says that about turnovers and then sticks with the guy that's turning it over sometimes?
I think, some of Kirk's greatest strengths are also some of his greatest weaknesses, and loyalty is among them. And loyalty, quarterback, for whatever reason, has elevated itself into that of a coach to him. And I understand we've seen it over time and time again where, there are schools that pull quarterbacks and go, and it kind of ruins their confidence. But I think Kirk gets to the point where he's so, it's like I'm sticking with this quarterback through hell or high water, and it never occurs to him that he should make a change, that it'd be important. I mean, there rarely happens. And last year was disgusting, frankly. I mean, Deacon, you could have put a running back in there at quarterback and just say, run the ball, that we're not even going to throw it. And they probably would have been better off. But
Linus, you could have put Linus in there.
Yeah.
With 6 plays.
Exactly. And Joe Labus, who's has had an up and down season at Central Michigan, but he's made plays, and he always did that against Iowa's defense. And it's like, what made him so hated by that staff that they refused to let him enter a game after, playing, I won't say great, but playing well enough to win a game in a bowl game against a pretty decent team. But I think when you look at Cade's numbers here, here's where they were. The other day he was 14 of 20. Okay, that's pretty good. You'd think, no, but 98 yards is not pretty good. 98 yards suggests a lot of short passes. Okay, well, if you run for 300 yards, that's fine, but that wasn't the case. Overall, though, he's got this year, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. In 10 total games, he has almost 1,200 yards. So that means he's averaging less than 120 yards a game as a quarterback. One of them he was knocked out in, a quarter, but he also has 7 touchdowns and 6 interceptions and completes 58.5%. Those aren't winning numbers. Those are below average numbers. And why I just don't see in this case, like Spencer built up a lot of equity with this program. He was a faithful, good soldier. He was not accurate and he did not have good feet, but he got all the trains running on time and everybody respected him as a leader. And I think there is some respect for Cade as well, but he hasn't built up any kind of equity at all to put himself in this position where he's, I thought he had a good first half. Well, what does that mean? That he completed a couple passes, got to midfield. Hooray. So I don't know. Right now, I'm not throwing any parades for him.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think we're doing that. But yeah. I guess the thing I questioned with Brian Ferentz too, when we were in the Petrus Padilla situation, or even the Hill Labus thing, although I don't think we got to talk to Brian until the bowl game. But I think the thing that Ferentz forgets, Scott, and it's a little secret in case anyone talking to Kirk listens, you can actually put Cade back in.
Yeah.
Like you have that. It's not like a baseball where you can't put the pitcher back in once you take him out. You can actually put him back in. You can sub. It's not like soccer, where you only get 3 subs a game or whatever. Like that part also baffles me a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't expect him to name. I mean, I had a 0% chance in my mind that he was going to switch quarterbacks this week, but let's hope he's ready to pull the trigger if things aren't going well on Saturday, because if he doesn't, it's going to get ugly in Kinnick Stadium.
Exactly. And, you're going against a defense that's first in the country in pass defense efficiency in Washington. Now granted, Michigan's offense is about the same as Iowa's right now. So
Iowa 2023.
Yeah, it's not doing so well. They went to their 3rd quarterback, but they went to different quarterbacks. And, and the part of the weird part is, as we said, he was 14 of 20 the other day, and so that's not bad, but, picking up only a few yards at a time and then a disastrous 3rd quarter, you're right. It's just the juxtaposition of you have a coach who stands up here and he's as a pillar for ball security. And then the last 2 years, they've been just a sieve. They just let, it's like a strain, with, the water or the turnovers, and there's no pasta there. It's just they've let things go over and over again. And I think, Brendan Sullivan, I'm not saying he's a great quarterback by any stretch, but he does bring an element to the game, which is he runs the football really well. And he was really accurate at Northwestern. So you have those two things, and I'm on the favor of let's make it. I think they need to make a change, because I just don't think that, we're at the midpoint this week, Chad. It's not like the season just started and he's working his way up. We're at the midpoint now, and you can't just start saying, well, he hasn't had a whole lot of time to play. No, that's over. You get rid of that in 3 weeks. Then it's, then you move on. And I think there's just, they went from being reasons to excuses. And I don't buy that.
You could definitely, I could definitely be convinced that you should definitely start Brendan Sullivan this week. And it wouldn't be, I wouldn't say you like stick with him the rest of the way, but let's see what happens. This is a really, really important game. And I do think the running threat is worth something, and I would have liked to have seen Scott. And I asked this in the post-game presser, instead of even doing the fake punt on 4th and 1, 4th and 24 inches, 18 inches, whatever it was, put your goal line quarterback in the game and go for it. Like, that's what you've actually got a red zone package. You've got, at least use him in that way, Scott. And I would suggest also, on top of that, when you are in the situation that Iowa was in at the end of the first half, remember this, when Ohio State punted, there's about 2 minutes left. Ohio State's got all 3 timeouts left, and you're on your own 5 or whatever it was, 7-yard line. Put in Brendan Sullivan there. Because they are pinning there. You're not going to throw, you're not going to drop back the pass. We know that. So use Sullivan there. Like, I think he could be the inside the 10 quarterback, both 10s, frankly, to get out of danger. So anyway, just use him. If nothing else, use him more often. Use him situationally. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that this week. At least Lester, I think Lester would advocate for that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. When Kirk, when we were asked about him, he goes, maybe I'm too conservative. Yes, you are. But it's not only that, it's your risk averse. And this was not the game to be risk averse. If it was 13-10 late in the third quarter, you still go for it. You know why? Because that's Ohio State. That's not Michigan State. That's not Minnesota. It's not Wisconsin. That's Ohio State. And in order to showcase the fact that you're going to win the game, you've got to put a piece of yourself out there. And I think that's when, 4th down and inches or whatever, it's like, okay, go for it. And I know you asked specifically, well, why not just leave your quarterback out there? Because they went to a punt formation and then he turtled up and, I don't know, and called timeout. Okay, that's fair. Then put your first team offense out there and get Hayden Large behind him, or Cade Pieper or whatever, and shove them as far as you can up the field, get that first down and keep your drive alive, because that builds confidence, and yes, you don't want your team at midfield and trying to, battle the Ohio State University that way. But sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith. And I think Kirk, his risk-averse personality just prevents him from doing those things. And it was at the site of his greatest weakness in 2009,
that's the thing. You would think he would have thought that through and realized, hey, I was too conservative here to beat Ohio State before. Maybe I should actually change it up. Do the Costanza, do the opposite.
Costanza.
But you just can't play. I know we're re-legislating things that's 5 days old now, but you can't play field position with Ohio State
Yeah.
You got to throw haymakers. Remember the 2018 Penn State game, Scott?
Yeah.
Remember that game? Iowa was crazy that day.
Yeah.
They were doing fake punts to Peyton Manziel. They were doing the fake field goal down, and like they were throwing shots that game. Like where is that? Where's that Kirk Ferentz? You know?
Yeah, remember back then? I mean, they threw a fake field goal at Michigan State, and the sidewinder one to T.J. Hawkinson. The polecat in 17. I mean, there was all these plays like 6-7 years ago, and then they've just decided, it's like the Wildcat in 2020. Whoa, that works too well. Let's not do that anymore. So it's just this constant grind, and it's just like, God, you've got to avoid some of this. I just think that, he gets in his own head, and he's so risk averse, and if you're playing an opponent where field position really matters, then it's understandable. But this isn't that opponent. This opponent will do exactly what it did to you. They've got too many weapons.
Right.
You got to go out on a limb once in a while. And if they get the ball at midfield, say, my bad, but I'd do it again. Let your team know that you have faith in them to execute offensively, and then also on defense to hey, put out the fire. It's only at midfield. You're not taking a fake punt from your, inside your 20. You're not pulling a Brett Bielema with Brad Nortman.
Well, Scott, whether you're a 6th-year senior quarterback or an old dude like me or you, I'm not calling you old, but we're kind of old dudes. GameDay Men's Health can keep your performance up in all areas of your life. Keep it on track. GameDay Men's Health can give you, how we want honest evaluation of quarterback play, Scott? They'll give you an honest evaluation of your testosterone levels and make sure you get the options you need to improve your mood, your energy, your sex drive, your athletic performance. GameDay can also help you with weight loss. Consultations, free, easy, simple, private, no obligation. Check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Call one of their locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty. It's about as easy as it gets, folks. Make sure to tell them you heard about GameDay Men's Health on Legends and Listeners. Scott, we've gone a half hour into the show. We haven't talked about Caleb Brown yet and the Iowa wide receiver position. I'm going to throw it to you. I've written about it a few times already. Why can't Iowa have nice things at wide receiver?
That's the eternal burning question, Chad. Even when they had decent quarterback play, they really struggled at wide receiver. And then when they actually did have a decent wide receiver core, then they threw it all away. I mean, when you think back to like 2019, and this is crazy to think, they had 169 catches among their wide receivers. And, you had Charlie Jones. And you had, well, wait a minute, he wasn't playing at that point. But you had Tyrone Tracy, and you had Amir Smith-Marset. Yeah, he was on the roster, but he was walk-on. And you had Tyrone Tracy, who, by the way, ran for 129 yards for the New York Giants on Sunday. And you had Amir Smith-Marset, who also plays for the New York Giants and had a punt return and stuff. And Brandon Smith, who's in the New York Jets as their practice team player and stuff. And I thought after that, they were moving in a good direction with Keegan Johnson and with Harlan Bruce. But as we saw in that 21 year, and you even have Charlie Jones and you have Tyrone Tracy, they didn't do anything with them. They didn't put them in the best position to make plays. I think now they actually do have a little bit more of a plan at wide receiver that works, whether that's from Lester to Budmeyer or whatever. But, with Caleb Brown, whether it was just a situation where he was just not capable of grasping what he needs to do or do it well or whatever. I mean, it just didn't work out. And I look at who they have, and I don't think he's one of the best 2 receivers. He's just a 4-star talent that came from Ohio State, and everybody wanted him to succeed. And so now it's like, well, why didn't he? Is he not good enough or what? And I don't know that answer, but I know, he played one play against Minnesota and he had a chance and it didn't work out. And, but the attrition at wide receiver has just been a disaster for more than a decade now.
Yeah, and I think that snap at Minnesota is a good microcosm of why Caleb Brown didn't work for Iowa. You know, you could argue though. I mean, same with Charlie Jones, same with Tyrone Tracy. You know, if you've got talent, find even if they don't grasp every detail you want, find a way to use them. You know, Jeff Brom used Charlie Jones the right way.
Yeah, he only led the country in receptions that year.
Yeah, 110 catches a year after he had 21 for Iowa.
Yeah,
21 catches for an entire season. And then, you know, Tyrone Tracy, I wrote in my article on Tuesday, you know, had 15 catches for 106 yards in 2021 as a Hawkeye.
Yeah,
He had more yards than that on Sunday for the New York Giants.
Yeah,
in an NFL game starting.
Right.
He was actually on my I put him in my starting fantasy backfield. Yeah.
Nice.
I had Dave Montgomery and J.K. Dobbins both on bye, so I had to pick someone up, and I was happy. You know, he got 129 yards, man. So I'm just saying, like Tyrone Tracy's like a fantasy football play. You know what I mean? Like, and Iowa didn't use him.
You know, and part of the problem to me was they put him as the X receiver.
Right.
That's not his position.
Right.
You know, and it's square peg round hole. What are you doing here? Why are you putting him at that position where that doesn't suit his skill set and it doesn't help your football team? Why not put him in motion? Why not make him a slot guy? Well, we already had a slot guy in Nico Ragaini. No, Tyrone Tracy's your slot guy. You know, Nico can play any of the positions, but it was just, again, they were so hard-headed in what they wanted to do, and this was a Brian thing, and it just, they didn't deviate. And now you look at it, and you know, Jacob Gill has been a real godsend for them. You know, he was a guy that you think about him and Reese Vanderzee. Did we expect going back in the summer that they would be starters? I mean, we didn't even know if they'd be contributing, you know, and here they are both starting, and Gill's been a really good receiver, but overall, you know, it's really just disappointing, you know, again, with him in particular, because I thought, you know, he had potential. He does have athletic ability. It's just, you know, they just never put him in a position to succeed, and he never took it if they did.
Yeah. And whatever went on behind the scenes, very complicated. Obviously, the OWI did not endear him necessarily to reflect well upon him, and sound like, you know, just there's a lot of stuff maybe that, you know, he could have done better behind the scenes. Let's put it that way. And in the contrast, Scott, and this is where I want your opinion is, I mean, Reese Vanderzee, Jacob Gill, they do everything that Iowa wants. Diligent, hard worker, on time, available, willing to block. They do all those. Those are all great qualities, Scott. So it's hard to argue with that, especially when you see the long runs that Caleb Johnson's breaking off this year. You got to give credit to both those guys, especially Jacob Gill, for the great blocking he's doing. But you also don't recruit, you know, receivers aren't going to come here to block. They just, you're not going to get the big receivers to come here. So that's why I think the Caleb Brown story felt different. It's like, you finally got a talent now. What are you going to do to use him? It didn't work out. That said, Scott, well, here, give me your opinion on that first. Go ahead. Like, why? Yeah.
You know,
is that a fair thing? I mean, to have that be your expectation for receivers?
No, I mean, you expect receivers to catch the football and stretch the field and make big plays. And I see potential with Reese Vanderzee. I see with Jacob Gill a really solid contributor. You do need more there. And they have really leaned into 12 personnel this year. So you're largely not getting 3 receivers on the field on a consistent basis. And who's your number 3 is a Caden Weegan. Caleb Brown never fit it because he was suspended for the opener and then just never really saw a lot of time. And so they really have to imagine, what do you want from this position and how do you want it to succeed? Because they've done so well at recruiting 3-star guys that fit and do well and maximize their potential and their growth and end up in the NFL on a defensive line, offensive line for the most part, tight end, of course, defensive back, all these position groups. And you look at wide receiver and you're like, do you guys even know what you're doing? Do you even know what you want to do? How do you make these guys happy? And not only that, how do you maximize their potential? And it just doesn't, it hasn't added up for a long time. Not since Marvin McNutt really was there, because I look at like Tavon Smith and I thought he had a lot of talent and it never worked out for him. And Matt Vandenberg was a really good receiver, a good receiver, and Nick Easley was a good receiver, but I didn't think they maximized Brandon Smith at all. I thought he had a way more potential than they showed.
Absolutely.
And if the portal was going on, I don't know that those two would have been around very long.
Yeah, good point. And I guess what I would just think, the last point I was going to make on receiver is I do think Tim Lester and John Budmeyer deserve a little runway here. This was not the guys they recruited, but I think Lester has some. I think he has a vision here, and I do like that he is implementing Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard into the game. They're the 3 and 4 receivers right now, not Caden Weechin. We thought Weechin would be a bigger role player. It's 3 freshmen and Jacob Gill right now are your top 4, and Seth Anderson's coming back from injury. So, we'll see what he does, but I see potential with Bowie. I do. If you see him up close, he's a good looking player with some athleticism, some size. I thought he made a nice catch the other day. I mean, we're grasping little victories here at receiver, but it's something. And they obviously like Dayton Howard. He's a taller guy, So, and I do like Vanderzee a lot. He's just getting manhandled right now in some ways by guys that are probably 5 years older than him.
Yeah,
right. And he's learning the game here. But I like that I like him as a prospect is what I think he's a good prospect. So I think there's potential here, Scott. And I think the offensive coordinator understands what they need a receiver going forward. I do. I think that I like what Lester's doing with the receivers. He just has to deal with what he's got. And so they're leaning into what they're good at, which is 12 personnel and blocking.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as Kirk said, Addison Estrenga is not going to be able to play this week, and so their 12 personnel is probably going to go 13 a little more often. I'm sorry, 11 a little more often. I misspoke. But I do like the talent that they've acquired, and you could tell with Jarrett Bowie and with Dayton Howard. I kind of wondered, okay, is this guy just going to get lost? No, he's out there, he's playing well, and TJ Washington I don't think he saw any snaps the other day, but he's a guy that's kind of in that ballpark, So I think they're using the guys that they want to use, and maybe there is more talent with them than there is with Caleb Brown. It's just the problem is for him. He was a top 100 guy, a 4-star, went to Ohio State, then he was available. Then he comes to Iowa and it's like, oh, look at this, a glass of water in a desert. We finally got something. And then it's like, yeah, but it all evaporated, it's gone. And that's kind of where we are with wide receiver. But I think though, Chad, that there's more hope now. I do see a path forward, and I see it, a lot of it schematic, and I do see some of the players that are there. And I think, if Terrence Smith remains a Hawkeye, which he's committed, I think he can be a really big asset too, because he is quite an athlete.
No, good to know. Good insight there. Scott, man, we're going long on these topics, but we could go much longer if we wanted to, but let's move on. So the term union cards was something the On Iowa podcast with Scott Dochterman and Mark Morehouse. Which one of you came up with that, by the way?
Oh, it was Mark. Mark always came up with the smart stuff.
So the listeners who are unindoctrinated here into the Doc and Morehouse lingo, what is a union card for in Iowa football?
Yeah, that was kind of the term Mark started using, and then I, of course, co-opted it because he always came up with good ones, and that was where the players that got in the starting lineup and just never left, but you never really looked at them and went, yeah, they're getting better, or they're an all Big Ten guys. They're just kind of guys, and they're there, and you watch them, and you're like, And there are several that I could use their names, and I'm kind of reluctant to, just especially ones from the past. It's not really fair to them, but you know who the players are. That maybe they're a linebacker and they just kind of take up space and they do their job, but you're kind of like, what? So I think there's a few right now on this team that you want to see some value, you want to see some big plays, some production, something to showcase that they are, that kind of a player.
Well, let's talk about, let's start with just Cade. Does he qualify for the Union card, Scott? Because it just seems like there's a loyalty to him there, and we're not seeing the production. So just in terms of the definition here, is he a Union card holder?
I think so. He's a guy who transferred from another plant and he automatically has seniority or something like that. He came to the Hawkeye plant, but he's a guy that just, it's like, what are, the equity, you got this equity, but where did it come from? And
right.
Why does you continue to stay with it? And there are other players who have played well at times that have kind of reached that status, and I'm sure you're going to bring them up. And I do think that though with Cade, that he's the guy that, what have you proven at Iowa? Kirk always goes back to 2021. Well, let's face it, Michigan was a great team around him. And he was able to keep the trains running on time, but he had 15 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he had great players around him. It just so happens that, he helped, he was part of it and helped the team win. And he should have been a really good contributor here. It's just maybe injuries robbed him of some of that. But, I just haven't seen the Cade McNamara that helps take Iowa to another step forward on offense.
So David asked Kirk a question on Tuesday about, he said, the reference that Cade's last touchdown pass against a power conference opponent was against Iowa in 2021, Scott. And we were talking about this before the show. And the last touchdown pass that Cade McNamara threw against a power conference opponent was to Eric All, who's also a former Hawkeye, who's with the Bengals now.
Yeah.
And doing quite well, actually.
Yeah.
That's a long time, Scott.
Yeah.
So that's a long time to hold that card. I mean, Kirk's given him a lot of equity. So that's what we're talking about, folks. That's what we're talking about. We're not going to go into the quarterback conversation again. But when we talk about Union cards, there's a couple 6-year seniors, I would say, on defense that maybe didn't look to have the greatest game against Ohio State. And Iowa has some guys on the bench that you're interested in seeing. And maybe are they playing 4-2-5 versus 4-3 really well? From what I understand, talking to people within the program, is they do value Kyler Fisher as the outside linebacker versus Castro as the cash when it comes to heavier personnel, run fits, etc. Those extra 20 pounds to them mean a lot. But I still question, Scott, even if you do believe that, which I don't doubt that whatsoever. But are you getting your best overall talent on the field? You're taking Xavier Wampa off the field to put Castro back at strong safety. So you're gaining Kyler Fisher against the run, but you're losing Xavier Wampa. So is the benefit worth it, is what I'm saying. Obviously it's a chess match all the time, but Kyler Fisher's been playing a lot lately, and it's just not. It's just an example of players that need to be making bigger plays. And we saw Mecca Egbuka matched up on him. I think Chip Kelly schemed him open a few times, and it stands out. So what do you think?
I'm there with you on this one. And I liked it when they went to cash, but I think sometimes they overthink it. Go back to what Norm Parker did 20 years ago, because Kirk loves to talk about this stuff. And that is, get your best 11 players on the field and leave them out there. And I think in this situation now, it's one thing if you're talking about goal line or they're going super heavy, 2 tight ends, fullback, running back, 22 personnel. okay, I understand then you're going to want to go with 3 linebackers and really match up. I mean, old Wisconsin before Luke Fickell, that was a time where you wanted to run 4-3. In fact, I remember they were running 4-4, I think it was, against them a few years ago when they had Jonathan Taylor. But I think you're taking off a 5-star talent every time you do that in Xavier Wampa. And I think he's been kind of inconsistent this year. He's been giving up a big play. We all know that one. But I think overall he could be better. But I think sometimes he's constantly looking, all right, I need to be replaced. And then comes Kyler Fisher. And he outgains them. He's got a bigger physique, no question. But, and sometimes I think they just need to stick with what they have. Castro where he is, and let your players kind of continue to make plays and only do that when you absolutely need to. 3rd and 1, goal line, that sort of thing. I think, but they are, the defensive coaches, unlike the offensive coaches, get a benefit of the doubt from me on some of this. But I still think that they should make some adaptions there.
Yeah. And it's definitely not, they love Kyler Fisher. So
yeah.
They absolutely love him. He's like a model special teamer.
Absolutely.
He's a great story. This isn't a criticism of him. It's more of a scheme thing. It's more of a question of they are subbing Scott like every snap on defense.
Yeah.
Wampa's running off the field, on the field. Sometimes it's entering her. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts on this defense. And let's be honest, this defense is not what it was last year. It's given up more than 5 yards per play, Scott. This is a team that's led the country in yards per play allowed the last 2 years, correct?
Yeah.
And I know they just played Ohio State, but it was an issue before that. Yards per play. I think they're I'm trying to look it up. It's like 5.07 or something like that. That's a big number for Iowa. It's yeah, they're 5.08. They're 47th in the country, Scott, yards per play allowed. So I'm just saying, it feels like there's some tweaks that are needed here, and we don't want to put everything on the quarterback.
Right. I think there's 2 things that I've kind of identified that the defense needs to do a better job. One is consistency in the back end. I do think that they're missing plays, whether that's safety not getting over in half coverage like against Troy, or what appeared to be the cornerback. I rewatched the play. The play that broke Iowa's back was that long pass early in the 3rd quarter on that first drive that they connected with Jeremiah Smith, who, by the way, is a freak, certifiable, freak. But rewatching Jamari Harris and the way he played it, he ran with him for 15 yards, and then he just kind of sagged, and then Smith sprinted past him, and that's not fair to the safety. Quinn Schulte, who I think has played really well, all things considered. He's more limited athletically. I think that's fair to say, especially against somebody like Jeremiah Smith, who everybody's limited athletically against him. He's a freak, but I think, those things never happened before, that they would play the right way. And then the other area, Chad, that I've been concerned about for a while, all year, frankly, is the lack of edge rush. I don't know that they have a consistency there. I think the interior line has been fantastic. And I think Y.A. Black is one of the best linemen I've seen all year. He was the best lineman on the field, either side of the ball for either team the other day. But I don't think that, I just don't know that they have enough disruption off the edge. And we've talked about that for a long time. And, can they bring somebody up? Can they do something different? I don't know. That's up to them. But those are the 2 areas: consistency on the back end and consistent pass rush off the edges, to me has been very concerning.
Yeah. Just circling back to the Schulte question, because I think Fisher and Schulte are the 2 guys that were wondering if the Union Cards situation applies to. Kind of looked into it a little bit, and it sounded like, that long ball was more on Harris than Schulte. Schulte was doing the right thing. Harris just made a mistake, and he let his guy go. He shouldn't have. He should have had outside coverage on him, and Schulte at the inside instead. That's why Schulte's moving up. He's not backpedaling. It was just and Schulte did make a great play to stop him. But that said, my question is, is Schulte giving you enough back there? I just think he needs to be doing more. And nobody at the safety position is doing a lot right now. I mean, Wampa included. Yeah. One entering are included. When they've been on the field, they just haven't made plays. Schulte got a pick against Minnesota, yes. But you're just not seeing – you just want to see more. I think they're getting great play from three guys on defense. Higgins, Harris, and Black. Graves has been good. Jackson's been good. Those five. Let's give them those five. The rest of the guys, I think
Castro's been pretty good.
Castro's been pretty good, yeah. But he hasn't been as good as I thought he was going to be. And I'm not criticizing him. I'm just saying I thought he was going to be like
the superstar.
Bob Sanders, I feel like we need to see more from a lot of those guys on defense. And
And I think it starts with a lack of pressure up front, because one of the things that they've done well a couple of years ago that they didn't do as well last year, as we saw with the turnover margin situation, that when they get consistent pass rush, then that's when their defense, really becomes a matrix, and the teams are coming after them. And I think, the other part though, Chad, is this is where I'll slip on the other side of the argument is it's still kind of early in the season. Their opponents, they're playing 7 more opponents, none of which are named Ohio State. That we saw it kind of develop late against Iowa State, and we saw it throughout against Ohio State, that it was just a detriment there. I think against other teams that they'll probably be in better positions where they will have leads, where they'll be able to force other teams to play to their strengths as opposed to Iowa strengths, as opposed to their own strengths, and like Ohio State did. And Iowa State was a 50-50 game, of course. I mean, a 54-yard field goal, makes the difference. But, I want to see more out of that unit. And I don't want to sound like I'm picking on anybody, but, I think Quinn can play better. And, I thought he played better a couple years ago, and I want to see more out of cornerback. I mean, Jamari included. I mean, Jamari gave up a big play, and probably the key play of the game, because it was a third and long. If they stop them, they force a punt, then you start hearing people, I don't know if boo, but grunt in Ohio Stadium. And then you get the ball and it's 7-0. But instead, when you give up that kind of a play, that changes the dynamic, because then he posts up Deshaun Lee and looks like Calvin Johnson,
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. And so you're just like, okay.
Well, this opponent this week, Scott, Washington, they look good. They look better than I thought they were going to be. They don't turn the ball over. Will Rogers just had his streak of 269 passes without a pick come to an end against Michigan, but they beat Michigan. They beat, I mean, I don't think Michigan was a top 10 team, but they beat a top 10 team. They've got a good running back, Jonah Coleman, 5'9", 229. They got good receivers, Scott. They got a top 10 defense in the country. Their defense statistically is better than Iowa's right now. So, as I look at this game, Scott, and we're going to get into Big Ten talk here in a second, this might be Iowa's toughest game left on the schedule. I think you could make a case for that.
I think this one or Nebraska.
Yeah,
I really believe that, and I think I am blown away and impressed with Jed Fish to be able to do what he's done, because this was a team that played for the national title last year, turned over its complete roster, one starter returning. And then, by the way, the coach went and had a really bad week. Our friend, your former colleague, Kennington, we had a staff meeting Tuesday afternoon, and he had to lead it to explain what it was like to cover an upset of that kind of magnitude. And, as crazy as it could be around here, amplify that by 1,000 when you start talking about Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, but I digress. But, losing all those players and to the NFL too, Roma Dunze, who's going to have a Hall of Fame career with the Bears, I'm sure, and everything,
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, the way they're able to put that team together. I mean, Jonah Coleman is a fantastic running back. Will Rogers has more snaps than just about any player in college football, and to beat Michigan and they played Rutgers really close too. They played well. They haven't played a lot of great offenses. I will say that is kind of skews the numbers a little bit, but this is going to be a very competitive team, and I expect it to be this is a game, to me, it's going to come down in the last 5 minutes as to who wins.
Yeah. I asked, I talked to Jay Higgins on Tuesday, and I was like, their defense is ranked higher than yours? And he was like, kind of looking at me like that. He has he doesn't study the defense, but then he's like, who have they played? Yeah. Like, he was skeptical. So I think you got a point there. They played, they played Rutgers, they played Washington, they played Northwestern. Not great. I'm sorry, Michigan. Did I say Washington? They played Michigan, who doesn't have an offense this year, Rutgers and Northwestern in the Big Ten thus far. So I get it.
And then they play Iowa's offense. So
that's true.
Rutgers has a great running back. Michigan has a great running back. Northwestern doesn't really have a great offense. It's worse than both of them. And then Iowa, it's just a running back driven. So their pass offense numbers are going to be like out of this world after this week. But
yeah. And it doesn't look like Northwestern's, wonderkind offensive coordinator has. There's a Ted Lasso reference for you.
Yeah, I wonder. I know. I'm laughing at great Nate.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Scott, I do want to get at least a sentence from you about your visit to Nashville. But while you're in Tennessee, you'll be in the land of bourbon, Scott, and Iowa can certainly hold its own in that department. So hopefully you're taking yourself a bottle of Steeple Ridge bourbon from Iowa to Nashville, from farm to bottle. Steeple Ridge brings it big time with high-quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge on Broadway in Nashville, next to the goalposts, right? Ask for my name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Thank you for your support, Steeple Ridge. We appreciate you guys. Let's give us the nutshell version. We're going to have to read your coverage in The Athletic, Scott, about what's going on. I know we're going long here, so just give us the Reader's Digest of this. Is a significant. They're flying you to Nashville for this, so this must be a big deal.
This is significant in every single way possible, Chad. This is a bigger deal than any singular game. I mean, we're talking about every athletic director from the Big Ten and SEC, plus their ownership, their hierarchy for each league. They're meeting to discuss everything from how to progress through different, the settlement that was passed and gave it preliminary approval on Monday for the House case. Although they can't discuss figures because that's antitrust situations, and so they do have to make sure they keep themselves square on that, but also more scheduling among the leagues, because when you look at last year, the most watched game was Michigan-Alabama in the semifinals, not Michigan-Washington in the finals. When you look thus far this year, 2 out of the top 3 games, USC-LSU, Michigan-Texas, these leagues are the big dogs. And so they're just going to discuss things about how can they work together and create more opportunities to play one another. And of course, their owners, the TV company, the TV partners that they work with, would really like to see that these types of games and get these kind of ratings. And, that can really help out their bottom lines. And so I think you're going to see more cooperation there. Now, part of that is the SEC will probably have to go to 9 games. But there's also reimagining the postseason, and there's going to be heavy discussions on things like how do they work together for the college football playoff? Because in 2 years, the format can change. It can go to 14 teams. It could remain what it is at 12, but there could be a push for automatic qualifiers and things like that. And the Big Ten and the SEC have both kind of said we deserve like 3 automatic qualifiers per league, because there's a fear that if you're playing in a league this deep with this much top talent, when you have 15, I think it is 15 out of the 25 teams come from those 2 leagues in the top 25, that you really want to make sure that you don't get penalized for playing a tougher schedule than maybe a couple of the other leagues. So that's going to be a part of it. There's also going to be, I talked to the Ohio State AD for a while, maybe getting rid of the MTEs in basketball, where they're going to the Cayman Islands and they're paying $100,000 to go play in this tournament. And it's like, well, why can't we just do it ourselves? This is one thing he brought up, so I know it's been discussed. What if Florida decides to host one in Gainesville, and Iowa and Illinois go down there and they play Florida and Georgia, in a classic, instead of taking that trip to the Bahamas or the Cancun Challenge. So all of these things are going to be up for discussion, plus just ways to work, not only together, but ideas, brainstorming sessions. It's really pivotal to the course of college sports for the next decade.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating just to see it unfold. I mean, I can't really add much to that other than I'm interested to find out, where this goes from here. So many issues right now in college sports that affect the Hawkeyes and the Big Ten. Man, big stuff. And then speaking of Big Ten and TV, Scott, what an amazing week in the Big Ten it is. We've been pointing to this week for a while. Iowa is the big noon game. We mentioned that. So excited that Jason Benetti and Brock Hewitt are on the call, by the way. Like, I love that tandem. Like, I would much rather listen to them than Gus and Joel. No, I mean, Benetti's the best.
Yeah, Benetti's great.
He's tremendous. Friday night we got Northwestern Maryland. Fox, but I do like having that Friday night Fox game. Yeah. Wisconsin Rutgers simultaneously with the Hawks there on. That's an interesting, sneaky good game on BTN. But then you get to the biggies, Scott. Penn State USC in the 2:30 CBS slot, and then the Ohio State Oregon 6:30 NBC. A little late nightcap, Minnesota UCLA on BTN. But man, what a day. It's too bad we have to work. I would just love to watch these games all day.
Yeah, well, I've done that, but I've had to watch them, and that's actually more difficult than to go into the games. I'll be honest with you, but when you think about helmet games, and when you think about history, and you think about tradition, and then you throw on that all 4 of those new hires in the Big Ten, new teams, you start at big noon, 11 a.m. our time. Washington, Iowa, played in 3 bowl games in our youth, all the way up through our college years, 2 Rose Bowls and a Sun Bowl. So, the purple and the gold and the black and gold, and it's at Kinnick Stadium. It's not, in Pasadena or El Paso. I mean, that's really, wow. I mean, you think about it, I'm kind of charged about that, and when you kind of remove the workload and you think, that's pretty neat. Then Penn State USC, we've seen some great Rose Bowls with those 2 teams. I mean, the shootout that they had, I think after the 16 season, was just phenomenal. Sam Darnold and Trace McSorley, and I mean, back and forth. And then, Oregon, Ohio State, that's, 2 versus 3, and it's in Oregon, and then close it out. I mean, maybe not 2 great teams, but, Minnesota pulled off hell of an upset last week over USC, and now they're playing UCLA. They don't deserve UCLA. They're UCLA.
Yeah.
So this is exactly what they wanted when they brought those teams in. These types of games.
Yeah, for sure. And all 3 of those matchups. I mean, I guess those teams are always going to be crisscrossing time zones. That's their life over there. Yeah. But all of them are good. That part's going to be interesting too, because the time zone traveling team has not been very successful thus far. And so that could bode well for Iowa. I'm very interested to see the 9 a.m. effect on Washington. Is that a thing? I think coming off a big win against Michigan, that'll be a thing. to watch. It's hard to come back off a big win. We've seen, we saw, and not that this is 2017 Ohio State, but we saw what happened to Iowa the week after that game. It just happens. That's the way it goes in football.
And you play I'll say somewhat of a finesse team, and you're playing two very physical teams back to back in Michigan and Iowa, and you're playing on the road. And no offense to our friends in Piscataway, but Kinnick's a little bit different environment, even though it was good then. It was a Friday night game there, but coming to Kinnick Stadium, and it can get pretty rowdy. And I think Will Rogers has been prepared for it. He's played in the SEC, so it's the same deal. But I'm also like a note I sent out the other day that I saw in the note sheets was like the coolest thing, which was when they played in Iowa in 1937. It was Niall Kinnick's first game, and their quarterback was also who started in that game also was killed in World War II. And it's in the note package for Iowa. And I'm just like, wow. And how are they going to, this is the first newbie that's coming in, and they're going to do the wave.
Yeah.
That's got to be pretty cool for them, to say, wow, I'm part of this. And so I'm excited about it.
Yeah, same. I'm excited for the whole day. And that Ohio State Oregon game, especially. Maybe try to sneak a peek of that on my drive home on my YouTube TV. I think Ohio State wins that one. I was so impressed with them the other day.
Yeah.
I watched Oregon play Michigan State once I got to my hotel in Columbus, and they look good, but I think Ohio State just looks really good. Like Ohio State's good at every single spot. Like they were better. I mean, that Sonny Styles was better at the linebacker than I thought. Their offensive line was really good. I mean, they got two great running backs. Those receivers are insane, and Will Howard is better than I thought. So Ohio State's got it all right now. I think they might win convincingly.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I mean, they went from being a dog to start. It was -1 for Oregon to now -3 Ohio State. And this is where, Ohio State had so many really good returners. All these guys that decided to stay rather than go to the NFL, and they could have. Donovan Jackson, a guard, or Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimaleo, on and on. They had guys, Tyleek Williams, that all decided to stay. They got paid, but they decided to stay. But then they had enough to go and supplement it. And that's the difference now than it was 5 years ago playing at Ohio State, that even when, they could replace those guys as quickly or as good. Kyle Rowe, or when you had the quarterback and Kyle McCord leaves, you replace him with a better quarterback, and he actually wasn't too bad, but that's the difference between Ohio State now. And now next year they're going to lose a lot of guys. They're going to be kind of like Michigan to some extent, where you can't fill all those spots. But this year they're as complete as any team I've seen, and I've watched some of the good SEC teams: Georgia, Alabama. I think Texas. I think Ohio State's better than all of them.
Man, yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And there's still 4 unbeaten teams in the conference we cover, the Big Ten, but it's possible by Saturday night there will only be 2 left, because the Oregon-Ohio State winner or a loser will have a loss. And then Penn State, if they lose at USC, that'll knock it down to just Indiana and perhaps Ohio State or Oregon. So it's winnowing down here. Indiana's off this weekend, so they will not lose.
Yeah,
they will not.
Did you see the horror and the terror that's going on in State College, that they have to bus a whole hour to Harrisburg?
Yeah, James Franklin wants public money to extend the runway at State College Airport. So, yeah, man, if that's not like
that's a first world problem.
First world, that's the term I was looking for. You can't drive to an airport that's a little further away.
Oh my God, how terrible is that?
For a direct flight, for a direct charter flight. Oh my God, I would kill for a direct flight from State College to anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Or Pennsylvania to anywhere, whatever.
Cry me a river, James. I mean, it's not, it's and Penn State has that reputation of complaining about everything, and it just adds another layer to it.
Yeah, I think most Iowa fans will root for USC this week. They do not like James Franklin.
Yeah.
Anyway, great week in the Big Ten for Scott Dochterman. This is Chad Leistikow, Legends and Listeners, with you every Thursday morning here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. We'll talk to you next week from the Channel Seed Studios.